My mind's telling me no, but my body's telling me yes. Baby, I don't wanna hurt nobody, but there is something that I must confess.
Action News Network is an Aboriginal American media network. As such, we are protected under the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, or DRIP, Articles 8, 14, and 16. Action News Network is allowed to provide Aboriginal news and media content on non-Indigenous media platforms free of oppressive censorship. Any breach of this protection is a breach of international law.
Hey yo, Action News Network. Alright, we're gonna go over a couple of headlines. We got R. Kelly, this is from WGN 9, Chicago. Try to keep it local, as close to the source. R. Kelly held without bond on federal sex crime charges, saying please not guilty. It's from the Associated Press also. So R. Kelly appears in court Tuesday, June 6, 2019. Alright, Chicago. Federal judge on Tuesday ordered R. Kelly held in a Chicago jail without bond on sex-related charges, saying that the R&B singer had failed to convince the court that he would not commit new crimes if released. That means they have so much shit on him that they not. These are risks to the public. Basically, it's a nice way of saying it. U.S. District Judge Harry Leinenweber handed down a ruling after Kelly was arrested last week. Now he faces 13 federal charges in Chicago and New York, including having sex with minors and trying to cover up the crimes by paying off victims and their families. Alright, so if he has charges both in Chicago and New York, he might get charged with that Mann Act, which is named after this, I think it was like a boxer or some shit, but a black dude who was charged with bringing like white women across state lines for the purpose of having sex. You know what I'm saying? Just, it has a little bit to do with prostitution and shit, or holding them hostage as sexual slaves. Even if these women are grown and say that they're willing participants, it still can be classified under the Mann Act, I believe. Not a lawyer. Kelly, wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackled at the chain ankles, did not speak except to say yes sir when the judge asked if he understood the charges. His attorney, Steve Greenberg, submitted a not guilty plea. Sorry. Prosecutors said that the sexual abuse involved 12 unique victims, a majority of them minors at the time of the alleged encounters, and at least 3 new sex tapes. So there's a whole collection of these sex tapes out now. Assistant U.S. Attorney Angel Crow said Kelly was an extreme danger to the community, especially minor girls. She argued that he might flee if released. If he was attracted in 1999 to middle school girls, he is still attracted to middle school girls, Crow said. It's who the defendant is, and that, Your Honor, makes him a danger today. Kelly was first arrested on sex charges in 2002, but acquitted by a Chicago jury in 2008. After was arrested earlier this year on new state charges brought by Illinois prosecutors. His arrest last week was on separate federal charges. So these are federal charges coming against him. The other charges were state charges, which can be flimsy and easily fought. All right. He will be taken to New York while still in custody to face a separate indictment alleging he's sexually abused underage girls across the country. He'll be taken to New York. Okay. Kelly faces a mandatory 10-year sentence in Illinois with a maximum of 195 years, as well as up to 80 years on racketeering charges in New York. Yeah, so he's going to get hit with that RICO, because that's what New York will do with racketeering. In New York, he was accused of being the leader of a ring of associates who lured underage girls to sex. Now, we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein soon, and nobody's really putting together, because the people that's focused on R. Kelly are focused on R. Kelly. The people that focus on, you know what I'm saying, and unfortunately we know what group of people is only focusing on R. Kelly. All right, I'm not going to say any particular group, but we know, and then same thing with Epstein. The people that's obsessed with Epstein's cases like that is all on Epstein. You have a few people that are saying, oh, both of you got, charged with basically the same fucking crime. Accused of being a leader of a kind of a ring or a cult of provocateurs or providers of underage girls for the purposes of having sex. If you think this is coincidental, you're out your mind. I'm really going with the fact that I believe that both Jeffrey Epstein and R. Kelly both are smaller pieces to a bigger puzzle, a bigger enterprise with many tentacles of this sex trafficking of these young women and shit like that. And I applaud President Trump for his efforts in getting this shit together. And I think anybody that's, if we can't agree on that and shit, then, honestly, I feel like you just perpetuating this, the bullshit like what they're being accused of, right? So it's from the New York Post. Jeffrey Epstein has sex den while serving time. Says lawyer, I guess. Alright? And picture that motherfucker. Jeffrey Epstein's cushy Florida plea deal allowed him to leave jail nearly every day to go to a private office on work release. But his office time was spent on an entirely different form of release. Sex with young women, a lawyer alleges. It was if you was in jail in proper sexual contact, said Brad Edwards, a lawyer repping a string of Epstein accusers. He was not just sitting there conducting some scientific research for the betterment of the community, Edwards said at a Manhattan press conference. He was having office visitors, female visitors, some of whom were flown to him from New York and continuing to engage in sexual conduct literally while he was in jail. Under the highly questionable plea deal that Epstein cut with Florida prosecutors in 2008, he was allowed to plead guilty to just 2 counts of sex solicitation. Again, we just talked about R. Kelly in Illinois, his first case that he was let go of. Well, 2 of them, they both were state charges, and Epstein was charged with state charges in Florida. But like I said, state charges are a lot flimsier than federal charges. And now at the same time, these guys are being brought in under federal charges, which is a totally different ball game. All right, and the same thing's gonna happen to Jussie Smollett, but he's almost asking for the federal charges because he wants to sing. And I really think R. Kelly and I think even Jeffrey Epstein, because they seem relieved to be brought into to jail. And with the federal shit, they could probably make a better plea anyway if it's cahoots with government agents or whatever. So this will be really interesting to watch. But let's continue. Like I said, Epstein cut a deal with Florida prosecutors in 2008. He was allowed to plead guilty to just 2 counts of sex solicitation, including one involving a minor, despite having been accused of sexual abuse by scores more underage girls. The politically connected pedophile ended up serving just 13 months behind bars in private wing of Palm Beach County Jail. As part of the agreement, Epstein was allowed out for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, during which time he set up the private office next to one of his lawyers. Edwards said there were some arguments in court yesterday by Mr. Epstein lawyers that he was a model citizen while he was in jail. This nigga's living in a fucking whole nother world. First of all, he wasn't just in jail. He only slept there. He was in his office most of the day, and what I can tell you is he had visitors, female visitors. I don't know that any of them were underage, but they were all under 21, Edwards said. And the female visitors were not there for business and engaged in very similar conduct to which was described in the Palm Beach police report, in which Epstein was accused of coercing dozens of girls and young women to perform massages on him, then turning the sessions into sex. Epstein is now facing federal sex trafficking raps in Manhattan for allegedly setting up a nationwide network of victims, including underage girls whom he sexually abused. Alright, as we continue, still with the New York Post. As part of the probe, authorities uncovered a stash of porn in a safe in Epstein's Upper East Side mansion, along with diamonds, piles of cash, and a fake passport with his photo, but a different name, and an address in Saudi Arabia. His lawyers revealed in new court papers Tuesday that the passport was issued by Austria. They claim that Epstein got it 32 years ago because he is Jewish and feared he needed it to protect himself if he was caught up in Muslim terrorist hijacking. Alright. He never used it, they said. The passport was for personal protection in the event of travel to dangerous areas, only to be presented to potential kidnappers, hijackers, or terrorists should violent episodes occur, Epstein lawyers said in documents. Stool is illegal no matter what it is, you know what I'm saying? They did not address the fact that Epstein has a private jet. Edwards asserted that everything Epstein did seemed to be geared towards one goal: sex. Sex was his full-time job, the lawyer said. One of the questions I have received many, many times is what Epstein actually did on a daily basis. What I'm telling you is what he did on a daily basis is engage in these types of sex acts with young adults and children. What he did to make his money, I don't know. What he did legitimately outside of engaging in these sexual misdeeds, I don't know. Nor do any of the witnesses that we ever disposed. Dude was just a full-time sex maniac. As part of their push for bail for Epstein, his lawyers have submitted a one-page financial form that lists $559,120,954 in assets. A Manhattan federal judge dismissed the document as cursory and ordered a more thorough examination of Epstein's finances. Cursory basically means hearsay. You know what I'm saying? So that's not, really, that's not going to hold up in court. Hence why they want a more thorough examination of his finances, because they can't post him a bail. The bail always has to be, a severe punishment. Because remember, if you get acquitted of your shit or whatever, or your charges drop, you beat the case and shit. You know what I'm saying? You don't end up going to jail. You can get your bail money back. You know what I'm saying? After paying taxes and shit, which fucking sucks. But if they give him like a $3 million bail or some shit, which they probably, that would, even if he had $559 million, I'm pretty sure this man's worth a couple of $1 billion and shit like that. This is probably half the amount of money he probably has. Not even, because I would just put him a little over $1 billion. It probably is half. Alright? Epstein's camp has offered to let him be fitted with an electronic monitor, have his plane grounded, install surveillance equipment at his townhouse, and employ security guards to make sure he doesn't flee. But prosecutors argue that his immense wealth and connections could enable him to jump bail. Alright. Alright, so there's been a lot of, hoopla attention over this really fucking minor, and when I say minor, I mean very fucking minor, blackout that happened in Manhattan the other day. It's a whole bunch of theories and shit. I even got my own theory and shit, because like I said, I want to connect R. Kelly and Jeffrey Epstein together. The timing of both of their arrests, the fact that, in R. Kelly's case, he's getting charged by I don't know if it's the southern or the eastern. If it's out of Brooklyn, it's the eastern district of New York, which takes care of Long Island, which includes Brooklyn, which is Kings County, the borough of Queens, which is Queens County, then Nassau, Suffolk County, which are all on Long Island and shit like that. The southern district of New York covers most of covers Manhattan, Staten Island, the Bronx, Westchester County, I think Rockland, Putnam, maybe parts of Dutchess and Orange County. You're up to like from Newburgh down, including the cities of Yonkers and Mount Vernon, New York, and what have you and shit, right? So that's a different district or whatever, but they could all be working in cahoots. You know what I'm saying? New York City's a funny city like that. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, this fire. I mean, this blackout is not really. It's very common to happen in New York. So you know what I'm saying, that you can really squash a lot of conspiracies down with just that. It happens all the time. For the area, I would say a little bit suspicious because the area, I think it was from 70 something to like maybe around like Times Square, a little bit below Times Square, because I think he said it affected the Garden. That's like on 34th. So I think it was like from 28th up until maybe like the 70s. That's a vast swath of Midtown Manhattan hitting Times Square, and a lot of prominent hotels and shit there. And you got a lot of real prominent residences on Central Park West, Columbus Avenue and shit. The doorman and the buildings where you got the doorman there. You know what I'm saying, and the bellhop outfit and shit. You'll bring your groceries upstairs for you and shit. Them type of buildings and shit. Penthouses where niggas like De Niro and Pacino live and shit. They all on that side, Upper West Side, you know what I'm saying, especially around Central Park. So let's just read the article. It says the burning 13,000 volt cable torch off Manhattan blackout. Con Edison says equipment failure at a substation on the west side of Manhattan plunged neighborhoods into darkness. Utility said. As you can see, there's a picture right here. Yeah, this is West 67th Street. It's a very prominent neighborhood. Probably around going down towards Columbus Circle and shit. You know what I'm saying? Real upscale residences in this area. The power failure that plunged a broad swath of Manhattan into darkness for 5 hours on Saturday night was caused by failure of some of Consolidated Edison, or as we say in New York, Con Ed, equipment near West 65th Street. Officials of the utility said on Monday. The trouble that cut the flow of electricity to more than 72,000 customers, which 72,000 customers could affect a lot of fucking people, because one customer was a fucking hotel. You know what I'm saying? That got thousands of guests up in there. Another customer might be a building. You know what I'm saying? There, that distributes the power to the fucking and that building might have a couple thousand residents in there. You understand what I'm saying? So 72,000 customers can affect damn near 500,000 people. You know what I'm saying? So just keep that. But still very small for the New York metropolitan area. All right. Customers started with a 13,000 volt cable that burnt up on 64th Street and Western Avenue, Con Edison says. Now in New York, most of our wires and shit, especially in Manhattan, when you get into the outer boroughs, depending on the neighborhood you are, towards the outskirts of the city, they will have above wire shit. You see it in Northern Bronx, you'll see it in like Eastern Queens. Very scantily you might catch a neighborhood or two in Brooklyn with one. Definitely see them in Staten Island, but like in Manhattan, I say the whole 24 square miles of Manhattan is or whatever and shit like that, you wouldn't find above ground wires in too many locations, if at all. You know what I'm saying? If it's not just like something that the building needs done or whatever. But all the cables, and we have a lot of fires in the wintertime because salt they put on the streets tend to get into the sewer systems and crevices in the streets, and they can affect the lines down, the electrical lines. Salt's a great conductor of electricity. It'll blow the lines up. Sometimes you'll get manhole fires and shit then. Summertime, not so much, but you do get a lot of outages depending on the air conditioning systems you have in your apartments. All right, if you got a million people putting up air conditioners on at the same time, the shits fry out. They'll turn. If you in a building, in an apartment, I noticed from experience, you got like 2 AC units, and you can't have them plugged to the same circuit. Like let's say you got your living room circuit, you got you don't know that one of your bedrooms half the plug is on that circuit, and you plug it into that shit, you're gonna always fucking trip trip the switch for that circuit and shit. So you gotta make sure they're on different circuits, and even then it could drain and put your shit out, because your neighbor could be doing the same dumb shit and take your shit out too. So that happens a lot in New York and shit. And if enough people do it at the same time, it'll be a clusterfuck of rolling outages and shit. They usually do some shit where they take like some of the poor neighborhoods. Let's say they go to Central Harlem or up towards Washington Heights or in the South Bronx and shit, and cut their power off for like an hour to keep power from cutting off down in this neighborhood. So to me, growing up in New York, to see that the allergies was happening in this type of neighborhood around Times Square, 34th Street, all the way up to the 70s on the west side. That's a little suspicious to me. All right. So, dark smoke billowing from manhole covers in the street drew attention to passersby and city officials, but Con Edison's executive initially dismissed the burning cable to routine to have played a significant role in the blackout. Now they say otherwise. The loss of power also shut down many of the city's most popular sources of entertainment, and this is what I'm talking about, just the neighborhood that it's in, including Carnegie Hall, 26, or Carnegie Hall, you know, like I try to pronounce it right, but we say Carnegie Hall, but it's Carnegie Hall, and 26 Broadway theaters, and even cut off Jennifer Lopez during the middle of a song at sold out concert at Madison Square Garden. Like I said, the Garden's on 34th and shit, down on the west side and shit like that. In the interview, Mr. Crowley said, "We still have more analysis to do to understand what precisely was happening." At a substation on 65th Street on Saturday evening, he said investigators had determined that the protective relay system, remember I told you about the switches and the relay causes rolling blackouts, they failed to operate as designed on 2 levels, and those failures triggered and halt the flow of electricity to 6 neighborhood networks. A burning cable was common in the occurrence of sprawling power grid, Mr. Crowley says. Alright, now in New York we had 2 major blackouts. I mean, we have blackouts every year. You're gonna get blackouts in New York City. It's just gonna happen in summertime. They usually happen, well, around this time, July and August. All right, so even if you have some suspicion, there's always that benefit of the fucking doubt. All right, and I'm in New York. I'm telling you this. All right, we had the worst blackout we ever had, I think, was in '77. I wasn't born yet. I'm born a little after that shit. But I definitely heard the stories and shit. All right. My father was like in his early 20s then, you know, dating my mom and shit, and they both experienced that blackout in '77 and remember it vividly. I always heard the stories of it growing up, 80s, 90s, you know, the blackout '77, niggas was going buck, riding everywhere, and that blackout played a significant role in the creation of hip-hop music, alright, because a lot of motherfuckers in the Bronx was stealing a lot of DJ equipment and music equipment and shit like that, and right afterwards you had a ton of professionally DJ'd parties up and down the Bronx and shit because of this stolen equipment, alright? It just is what it is. The city was fucking shit back then, so you had all these poor motherfuckers, the lights went out, they did what they had to do. Now, I lived through the 2003 blackout. I was like just graduating from high school and shit. Very young, around like 18 years old, that type of, you know, they're like between 18 and 20, you know, got range and shit during this time and shit, just coming out of high school. It was a scary blackout, and it lasted days. It didn't last a couple hours, it lasted days. I think it lasted about 3 days. And it was crazy because I thought it was just my house. You know, I remember my dad was outside doing some work around the house and stuff like that, and the tools that he was using went out, and the TV went out, and I remember looking outside, and everybody started coming outside and shit. I remember that shit vividly. I remember it was pitch dark out, you need to have a flashlight and shit to walk around. I remember them days, alright? There was dudes riding around where I lived at with bats on there, you know, like hitting motherfuckers. You couldn't see literally 2 feet in front of you during that blackout and shit. And it wasn't as bad as '77 when you got all the looting. It was burned down a lot of shit in the Bronx and shit. This happened right after September 11th, so there was a different atmosphere in the city. Motherfuckers thought this might be terrorism. We didn't know what was going on. Like I said, this is right after September 11th, so it was a different time. This is exactly like a year and a half afterwards, you know. So there wasn't really. You had a couple instances in some real fucked up areas of the city, and like in Jersey or in the suburbs and shit, where you had some people breaking into the store, taking shit and whatever, but it wasn't as widespread as it was in '77. This blackout lasted days though. I remember that shit. Alright, it says a Northeast blackout in 2003 was a widespread power outage throughout parts of northeastern and midwestern United States and the Canadian province of Ontario on August 14, the 28th, 2003, beginning just after 4:10 p.m. Wow, I knew it was a couple of days. I don't think it's the 14th or 28th. I would have to like really go into that. But if it happened on the 14th, you know what I'm saying? I know for sure New York City had power by like the 17th. But it was a couple of days, and it's showing you. This is how much the areas was affected. As you can see, you got New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. So you had New York, I remember Detroit, you had Cleveland, you had Pittsburgh, you had Philly, you had Jersey, you had, Connecticut, and you had like Boston and Toronto and shit. All these major fucking cities, some of the largest cities in both the United States and Canada, out of fucking power. So that was like crazy then. Some power was restored by 11 p.m. I think, that day, maybe they got some parts of Manhattan up and running, but it was like by the time it hit the hood, it was like 2 or 3 days later. I remember they had updates every day on the TV and shit. Like niggas we had like a little generator in the portable TV. We was trying to watch updates on the portable TV. It was like on one of them battery operated shits. Y'all probably think I'm crazy. You had that antenna and shit, and you had like the dial like on the old radio. It was black and white, but we had like emergency shit. And my pops was like so happy to bring that shit out and use it and shit. Like, yeah, I got this, it's stuff like 15 batteries in that bitch and shit to make it work. But so every day we was checking up on the updates, and they would tell you what neighborhoods is gonna come on. It took a couple of days for us up in the North Bronx, Southern Westchester area. You know what I'm saying? I think Washington Heights was the last area in Manhattan to get power too. So they was really treating uptown real bad. It was, at the time, it was the world's second most widespread blackout in history after the 99 Southern Brazil blackout. Yeah, this blackout was crazy. The outage, which was much more widespread than the Northeast blackout of 65, affected estimated 10 million people in southern and central Ontario, which is in Canada. That's the Toronto area, and 45 million in 8 U.S. states. That's a lot of motherfucking people. So you have more than 50 million people across the Northeast United States and Southeast Canada without motherfucking power for like days, man. The blackout's primary cause was a software bug in this alarm system at the control room of First Energy in Akron, Ohio. I remember that bullshit excuse. But that shit is so technically crazy back in 03. Niggas was buying that shit. Base company, which rendered operations unaware of the need to redistribute load. See, it's a lot of fucking just bullshit, technical shit. According to the New York Independent System Operator, NY ISO, the ISO responsible for managing the New York State power grid, a 3,500 megawatt power surge towards Ontario affected the transmission grid at 4:10 p.m. Eastern Time. For the next 30 minutes to 4:40 p.m. Eastern Time, outages reported in parts of Ohio, New York, Michigan, and New Jersey, Cleveland, Akron, Toledo, New York City, Westchester, Orange, Rockland counties. All right, Westchester, Orange, and Rockland counties are immediate suburbs of New York. Baltimore, Rochester, Syracuse, upstate New York City, Binghamton, Albany, Detroit, and parts of New Jersey, including the city of Newark. This was followed by outages in other areas totally unaffected, including all of New York City, portions of southern New York State, New Jersey, Vermont, Connecticut, as well as most of the province of Ontario, including Toronto. Eventually, a large, somewhat triangular area bounded by lands in Michigan, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and the shores of the James Bay, Ottawa, New York, Toledo was left without power. According to official analysis and the blackout prepared by the U.S. and Canadian governments, more than 508 generating units at 265 power plants shut down during the outage. In the minutes before the event, the New York ISO managed power systems carrying 28,700 megawatts of load. At the height of the outage, the load dropped to just a little bit over 5,700 megawatts, lost 80%. As you can see, here's the major cities affected. New York City surrounding areas, which was me at the time, 14 million. You know what I'm saying? 300,000. Toronto area, just north of us, 8.3 million. To the west of us, Newark, New Jersey, and surrounding areas, 6.9 million. And you can add that to the 14 million in New York City. Toronto, Newark is right across the Hudson from us. Detroit, clocking in another 6.4 mil. Cleveland and surrounding area, damn near 3 mil. Ottawa, 780,000, 1.1 mil. Buffalo, New York, so this is upstate New York region around western New York. Buffalo, 1.1 million. Rochester, New York, just upstate, still New York, 1 million. And Baltimore and surrounding areas, 710,000. All right. So I told you, I believe, even though it doesn't really say Maryland on the map, I knew for sure from my peeps out in B-More that they had power out, out there as well. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, 77 was the worst blackout I heard of. I was born a little after that. Like I said, I was around for the 03 blackout. That was a crazy experience. I'm glad there wasn't looting and shit, but it was very dangerous to be outside. You did hear a lot of gunshots going off in some of the really rough neighborhoods. There was a lot of burglaries. You didn't want to be outside at night. People didn't go to work for a couple of days and shit like that. And I remember the store owners being outside with shotguns and everything to make sure their places wasn't getting robbed. All right. So this is from AM New York. Paper I used to read all the time on the subway because they give them out for free around the train stations. A brief history of blackouts in New York City during the blackout on July 14, 1977. A Strauss store on Liberty Avenue in Jamaica, Queens, had its metal curtain ripped down by looters. All right, and those were the stories I was hearing back in '77 and shit. See, New York City may be known as the city that never sleeps, but it doesn't mean it can't go dark. On Saturday, it kind of is a power failure, resulted in a blackout that affected 72,000 customers. We just talked about that in the heart of Manhattan. The power outage stopped subway trains in the tracks, stalled elevators, and knocked out traffic lights. While the billboards at Times Square went dark, and 26 Broadway shows was canceled. But the 5-hour blackout was not the first to hit the city, nor was it the biggest. So let's go a little brief history of blackouts. All right, I wasn't going to do all the blackout shits. This is going to give you a brief one of some of the worst ones. But it says there was a big one in '65. But, as it says right here, it was heralded as mostly peaceful. The city was in a different state back then, you know what I'm saying? Now, take it 10 years later, 12 years later, to '77, the city was falling apart. In '65, the city was in good shape. By '77, the city was falling apart. So that's why you had looters and shit. Because the same people who were there in '65, in '77. It's just, what happened to the Bronx is it's actually a crime of humanity if you really think about it. Because I remember what the Bronx looked like after the '77. We used to call it the Bronx is burning, or the burning of the Bronx and shit, when half the Bronx was just up in fire every day and shit. But the power outage that swept over the entire city on July 13, '77 was met with violence, looting, and arson. A 25-hour blackout. Okay, so that one wasn't even that bad. That was one day. All right, like I said, '03 it took 2.5 days at least for my house to get power again in my neighborhood in Mount Vernon, New York. It took about 2.5 to 3 days. All right, I know that for sure because I remember going out on 2 nights in the dark. Even though my parents didn't want me, but I went out 2 nights in the dark with my homies and shit like that. And let's just say we got in a couple of fights because we had to fight over a couple of stick-up kids and shit like that, using the dark to be covered. Alright, but it's sparked by lightning strikes at 2 power plants, resulting in 3,800 arrests and 1,037 fires and more than $1 billion in damages. The New York Times reported LaGuardia and King Empress was shuttered and commuter train lines was halted. About 4,000 people were evacuated from the subway system per the Times. All right, so that's how it looked in the '77 shit. We go more into this. Yeah, I was gonna dig deeper. So this is Jeffrey Epstein's fucking this is his flight log, right? So he keeps and he's a very smart dude. He keeps a log of all the people that's on his planes for insurance purposes and shit. You know what I'm saying? So he can't get sued and shit. So this should be something that most of these people fucking who get on here should know. All right, so David Rogers, his pilot, we'll look him up another time and shit. Or you can find us online. All right. So when you see J.E., that basically means Jeffrey Epstein, right? So you know he only puts his initials down, and I guess his personal lackeys, right? I wonder who GM is. But anyway, as you can see right here, it says President Bill Clinton, and this is him going. I'm pretty sure VHAH is probably fucking in the Virgin Islands or something like that, but who knows what the croissants is and shit like that. But as you can see, it says President Bill Clinton, Doug Bands, you know what I'm saying? I don't know who those people is, but I guess the people he want to extort, you know what I'm saying? He put their name fully on here, and it's coming back to bite all these motherfuckers in the ass and shit. And same as above, same as above, same as above. So they're traveling back and forth, it looks like, when I look at these logs and shit. Anyway, let's go to the next one. There's some interesting fucking names on this list if you really look. I would suggest looking on this shit because you see a lot of interesting names on these damn things right here. But you see this one again, Bill Clinton, right? And I know most of y'all seen her in Naomi Campbell. Wow. But I know a lot of y'all see these shits in whatever. Again, Bill Clinton for Secret Service, 2 males, 1 female. You know what I'm saying? Now he got his full government out. You got motherfucking President William Jefferson Clinton, William J. Clinton. You got, wow, hold on, Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker. Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey just got in trouble for some shit. That's long ago. You know what I'm saying?